My name is Michael Connor. I'm Artistic Director of Rhizome, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you tonight to HyperText Characters, an event that brings together some of my favorite artists working in this area or in any area today. When World War II ended, one of the scientists involved in the Manhattan Project, Vannevar Bush, wrote an article in which he asked, what are the scientists to do next, following this massive collaborative effort that brought together people from all over the country and really all over the world for what they thought was a project that would bring about peacetime, although its effects, as we know today, are much more multivalent than that. Vannevar Bush, his answer in that moment was something that set the stage for the development of what later became known as hypertext. The idea that information could be organized and human knowledge could be organized in a better way, in a more nonlinear, a more associative way, a more subjective way, and that organizing knowledge in this way, in this period following rapid scientific development, would yield incredible benefits for humanity as a whole. And it was Bush's ideas that laid the groundwork for a proposal written in 1989 by someone named Tim Berners-Lee, then working at CERN. Tim Berners-Lee is known as the founder of the WorldWideWeb, and when he proposed the web, what he was proposing was a way to organize knowledge at CERN, this large nuclear research facility once again. For Berners-Lee, the idea of hypertext, or the nonlinear linking of information, of human-readable information linked together in an unconstrained way, would allow CERN to manage relationships among its teams more efficiently, and it would allow quicker finding of all of this scientific knowledge. I think it's sort of one of the great narratives of internet art that these sorts of concepts that emerge in the military-industrial complex take on a life of their own when they're put into the hands of the public, and especially into the hands of artists. And in the case of hypertext, this system that arose out of really an anxiety about the loss of scientific knowledge and institutional memory turned into something which became a really great way for performing identity. The idea of a subjective, unconstrained, associative way of organizing knowledge has been used by artists since the rise of the web, beginning with the Mosaic web browser in 1993, as a way to present fractured, changing, multivalent aspects of ourselves in different kinds of projects that have evolved during that time. And so it's my great pleasure to bring together 3 projects tonight that are that all represent this kind of way of working. Performance involving unconstrained, nonlinear information linked together in ways that can be explored by users and allow sort of an intersubjective encounter where there's a character involved that's created partly by those who access this work and partly by its creator. And in particular, I'm really interested in presenting this event tonight in this moment when so much of the web is moving away from this idea of unconstrained, interlinked information and more towards constrained and highly organized information. And so revisiting the idea of hypertext, which is the founding principle of the web, I think has a kind of political dimension. So it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight 3 projects. We're going to look at them, and I asked the artists to think of this not as a panel discussion, but as like the net art equivalent of like a film screening or poetry recital, so that they're presenting the works for a kind of shared experience by all of us, and then we'll have a discussion to follow. And the 3 works that we'll look at tonight are, of course, The Pink of Stealth from 2004 by Mendi and Keith Obadike, Mouchette.org, 1996 to the Present by Martine Neddam, and PSYCHO NYMPH EXILE, 2016 by Porpentine Charity Heartscape, Neotenomie, and Sloane. And tonight's event was made possible as part of Rhizome's events program by the Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Arts, New York State Council on the Arts, New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Dutch Culture USA program by the Consulate General of the Netherlands in New York, who brought Martine over to join us tonight for this very special moment. This event is also part of the First Look series, which is Rhizome and the New Museum's jointly presented online exhibition program. which is currently presenting PSYCHO NYMPH EXILE as an online exhibition concurrent with this event. And First Look is supported by the Nice and Edwis Artist Commissions Fund, with additional support from New York State Council on the Arts, the Toby Devon Lewis Emerging Artists Exhibitions Fund, and the Warhol Foundation for Visual Arts. A special thanks tonight to Travis Chamberlain, the curator of public programs at the New Museum, and to Derek Wright, who does the technical work here, as well as to Kayla Noel, who organized all of the details of this event. And without further ado, I'd like to invite Mendi and Keith to come up and present The Pink of Stealth 2004.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
So before we get into the piece, just a couple of small things about the project. Well, first we should correct one small thing. So the piece is actually 2003, and we originally did this piece. It was commissioned by Electronic Arts Imix and the New York African Film Festival for an exhibition called Digital Africa. So the Pink of Stealth is one in a series of projects that we did that were about color around this time. We did a number of suite about color of net artworks. And in this work, we meditate on the color pink as a code for different elements of identity. And so there are a couple of parts of the project. One is a text sound work, which we'll play a bit of. There's a hypertext poem with some variations, and an online game. So first, I'd just like to ask if we could mute the laptop for a second, and I'm going to pull up a file here.
While he does that, at the core of the project is a story that we wrote inspired by 2 Hollywood films where the color pink is associated with the main character. We rendered the story as a text sound work and as a hypertext poem in order to offer a sort of prismatic experience of the text.
And so we've shown the project a few different ways, often in kind of exhibition context, so it's a sort of internet piece, but also a thing that we've shown a few ways in the gallery context. And so, you know, if you encountered the piece, you might just see the game and have to figure out how to sort of make your way around it. So So that's a little bit of the game. Now we're going to go to the hypertext element. Sorry, I'm moving between screens here. Let's start with So we'll read some of the hypertext poem here.
Variation 1, CC 6666.
A
A dinner party
was a good time
for a girl,
to take home
a rich man. Variation 2, FFCCCC. He knew how
to delight
a randy girl.
with a big train.
At night,
He felt
the hunger. Variation 3, FF6666.
to charm,
he had to lie. She wanted a stable guy
not a fox
in a mask. Variation 4, FF9999.
He knew how to delight a big guy.
With a
Walk of
the cunning. Variation 5, FFC0CB.
A strange time in a crowd.
of hunters.
And now if we could bring up the volume a bit on the laptop. So I'll play you the sort of audio file that was also sort of embedded in the piece. This is about 6 minutes in length, and this will conclude our section. Is the volume up? Check the settings. All right. Sorry. So, are we down a little bit? Thank you.
Mark had a healthy appetite. He really knew how to cook. On a good night, he would wander into a dinner party and charm your shirt off. He liked to tell stories. He liked to delight.
He wanted to be watched.
He was a charmer, a boy's boy,
He had a nasty cut.
Mark had a problem.
He read strange books. He had a few too many. He had a good time. He had an eye for art.
He had an eye for art.
And an ear for tongues.
He had a few drinks.
A few pink parts.
Randy was a nice girl.
With a less than rosy life.
She had color in her cheeks.
She didn't have to lie.
She didn't want a suitor with a bouffant.
She wanted a red-blooded, blue-eyed heir.
A guy with a stable.
A member of the club. He came for her in the afternoon.
He stalked the earth.
Randy
wanted to linger.
Randy wanted to linger, but she couldn't take him home.
He would have liked to have seen her true colors.
She brushed him off
And walked alone along the train tracks.
What would you do if your father was a rich man?
Randy asked one night.
Randy asked one night, pouting in a crowded room without a man.
Mark said,
"Tell me everything."
slurring all his consonants. He pretended not to know the things he knew.
At night,
in their separate rooms, in the separate cities of their minds,
each wondered
how it felt to be a fox.
Those hunters, did they, Mark and Randy, were a kind of bait. They lay in wait.
They laid in the cut in the thick of night.
They were cunning and quick. They were nimble and sly. They each had a plan and a mask
and a hunger.
All this and a pink shirt.
Thank you.
Now we have Martine Neddam presenting Mouchette.org, a project which, for most of its existence, has been completely and very carefully pseudonymous. Martine, in other words, has been impersonating a 13-year-old girl on the internet for 20 years. Most of us haven't been at it for nearly that long. I'll turn it over.
Okay, so I'll try to run you through the website in my own way. Some of you might have seen it as, many of you might have seen it already. The front page with the new sound and a new flower picture. Sometimes something different, so I might explain that later. That is something that, and another place, that is something I didn't make myself, that comes from the Mouchette net, where people could use the website and publish on the website. So I didn't make these things, and they come up sometimes on the front page. What I would like to show you maybe is the invisible links. It was also a great pleasure, maybe not so uncommon at that time, to hide the links, to hide some links. So, so of course, people would rush to the things that looked most obviously as links, but that was maybe less obvious, but obvious enough. And somewhere, when you search, you might find links like this. For example, this one, just a transparent GIF that served as a link and would take you to some strange. Here also you had to search the surface for sounds. Something which I had found on the net at that time, which I don't know what, yeah, some snuff movie maybe. And then if you, yeah, was also a link which had some frames. In fact, you don't always get the same when you go to that link. So you can't bookmark it for sure because it has a little script on. So some hidden links, some unexpected things, or maybe, well, more classic works of Mouchette. Let's try this one, Flesh and Blood, which was one of the first things I did when I had the scanner. That's not me, I got someone posing. Well, people knew Mouchette, but they were asking to see more of her, and I only had that little photo. So I made that work with some close-ups of body parts, with the mouth, and which is, well, a sort of, I always had that feeling of the screen as a sort of physical contact between two people. So one was on the other side of the screen. That's why I made that work. Okay, let's see some more Mouchette. Maybe this one. Okay, this is a difficult one. It's hard to catch. I dare you to. I'll give you the trick. It was a user who told me online how you should do it. Just like this. That's it. So here she comes. So now you can answer, and you get selections of the answers. one thing I'm most proud of is the users' contribution. So I have a huge database of very nice stories and very nice, and it keeps coming, not as frequent as it did, but it's still quite good stories. I also have made works using the database of answers because I have tools with which I can select some of the works and then present them in a different setting. Okay, let's look for another one. Maybe, oh yeah, I'm going to show you this one. It's challenging to, it's music. Once Mouchette composed some music. I don't know if you can read the text. I'll read it for you. Everything is very tiny in this work. They are pop songs that she has written, and it's very tiny. So she says, you've always known me as a web superstar, but now you will discover me as a pop singer. I made music and I composed these 7 songs for you. They have no words, no title, but I'm sure you will understand their meaning. As tiny as they are, each of them is a complete song, a whole piece of interactive music, which you can also see and touch. The interaction is not so much in the mouse click than in your reactions. The last of these songs will be my very last song. You may recall it, play it again, but it will link nowhere. It lack of interaction would leave you alone with your own reactions. So here they come. Watch carefully. They have a visual like these few pixels. So that's my first interactive song. The 12 pixels, they are more or less 12 pixels, and they are always different. So this time they were blinking slightly. I don't know if that was visible. Another one. Well, this one is very short. It also has 12 pixels, but put differently. And it's very small, but you have to play it 3 times before you get to the next one. Or 4 times. No, 4. That's the 4th one. This one is slightly blurry. That's it. That's another one. So that's a little piece of Mouchette pink music. What else can I show you? When I put, that was also my first, what I wanted to do with the first scan. One work, because of its title, that gets me band from many, through many filters, many sort of filters, because it has the word penis inside. So here it is. Something I didn't make it in the toys. I made it in the. I was very proud of my Photoshop skills, so I made it with Photoshop. And what else? Oh. Sorry. Oh, that's also interesting. The 404 file is that's the era 404, and it's like this. It has a little stone with this M, and then if you click on it, it has still the little stone, but it has the text field there, and then it says, "What are you doing here?" So so that's, you get a mail, and then you send this mail to me, so it picks up. So that's the. Oops. Oh, sorry. So that's the 404. So you never get out of it unless. Oh yeah, you do. Oh yeah, you do actually. That's another one. It has it's a found. I always worked with lots of found materials. It's a found animation that I dismantled and I used with a script, and it had another animation of the second arrow going around. Okay. It also also made to get you lost, so I get lost in it myself also very much, and it's made also to never go the same way again. So, maybe this one was.
Dat broekt niet. Wat zwiet en stroekt het wogenboos, wat focustropt de koeverkiet met slarverdekeld ruizenpoos. Hijkt hier de zeikel, dat broekt niet.
So it might sound like Dutch, but it's artificial Dutch, it's fake Dutch. And this is a sort of also little Mouchette composition I made. Okay, so maybe I'll finish. Yeah, maybe with this one. Secret. So this is also a sort of very simple work, just text, but in fact it has hidden sound. So here also you would have to go around, touch the surface until you get some sounds. I compare it to a skin you might touch in the dark, because I also find the internet is very tactile and physical. You use your hand all the time. So that's what the work is about. Maybe I'll what else can I say? The fan site? Okay. The fan site. It's things that the members sent me. So this was the most of the links are dead now, but this I would, these were the links to the site of the fans and the presents I received. So sometimes text or little photos in the mail. So yeah, works that people made for me especially. Something. Another one. So they're all kept. So this one was in 2000, a Christmas present. And more Mouchette works, animations, and Mouchette fly swat, etc. I love you, Mouchette. And maybe the Mouchette also did not only in voice experiments but also in text experiments, and she made poems in Japanese.
Wattle chick. Now is the Watley Freetly, and in the gearly goes, I've thiftly rackled frontily, and bickled for the trows. Oh, roopily and fortily, lie farley in a bale, and prend the wilkly in the den, whither the farley dale.
Some French.
Jeux d'antique. Quand Dimand de classe trépille les outagons pour goncer le gerpeau et vriser les sounis, Jeux d'antique sujoue des longs par un phony. Les curvesses le rouse et là, ploge ligon.
Dutch poem.
Het meik, nu beheert het schoos, nu ziekt de wergel. Het dover weeklicht, veens onthoekend, ik vrommel toelig, een vlingelkergel, mijn zierste zoot, de buns nog droekend.
And maybe I'll finish on the hate side. So she was famous enough to have her own hate site, although I had to arrange to have it made, but so that's not my style, so somebody else made it. And then you can read the, you can read now 20 years. this one. It sounds like a nice poem to me. Huh? Okay, well, thank you. Huh? Yeah.
And finally, we have Neotenomie and Porpentine here to present PSYCHO NYMPH EXILE. And this was actually a work that was produced under the Rhizome, or initially produced under the Rhizome Commissions program. It will go on to have, I think, more life beyond this point, and you can also see it online as part of First Look New Art Online on the New Museum website. I should probably fill more time until the laptop is open, but Porpentine is also here for her creative capital orientation because she received a creative capital grant this year. Woo! Okay, ready to go.
Hey, hi. Okay, so PSYCHO NYMPH EXILE is a multimedia project centered around a novella. And we're going to show a game hypertext poem thing first. And Brenda, what was it made in?
It was made with Unity, which is a popular game development engine for indie developers, and it also allows you to export to the web. So anything you make it is very accessible.
So you can see the backgrounds move with the mouse, and it has a very hypertexty, twiny kind of, format, but with CGI. The concept behind this is that it's a probiotic kind of therapy drink, and this is the vision of a person who is on it, and it's kind of navigating through her psyche. The characters, the subject of PSYCHO NYMPH EXILE is a convalescing mecha pilot and an ex-magical girl, so it's kind of based on these anime themes, except after all the idealism has shattered. Post Neon Genesis Evangelion, post Sailor Moon. Because a lot of anime, a lot of media in general focuses on, very young, sexualized underage people, and I was really interested in talking about people who are older than that, who, what does the damage look like after the fact? Here, let's, So this is kind of going through a bunch of images, some real, some hallucinatory, all knitted together of her past and present. The thing about her convalescence is that in this universe, trauma is this color-coded resource. And I wanted to talk about CPTSD and brain damage as very concrete, visceral things, because it's so easy to take mental harm and, just talk about it very vaguely. So in this universe, CPTSD beams through the ceiling of an apartment, it drips out of your body, it has all these different forms. Thank you, Brenda. Okay, so I'll just read a little bit from the novella. Brenda can show you. This is the cover art by Sloane. She's really talented. It's a really good cover art. That headless humanoid there you can see is a service animal in this universe called Pink Rubber Animal. And the green-haired person is the convalescing biomech pilot. And you can see the three eyes are like, these are the stickers from the project. Triple irises are a mutation caused by the disease.
And you can see here these beautiful stickers designed by Neotenomie and me. And you can see that the novella has kind of a fragmented format. It's not, most of it isn't written in big like blocks of text. It's kind of like Twitter-sized format, and that's like the aperture allowed by brain damage. Like that's, I like to write in that length because it's very, it fits my attention span, it fits like the amount of time allowed by, you know, disability and whatnot. So they're united, the fragments are united into chapter headings. So you're kind of getting bombarded by all these little vignettes and micro vignettes about a subject. Like having a bunch of glass thrown at you. It just like penetrates through all these different parts of your body.
I noticed you also used footnotes in the novella in kind of the same way that you do with hyperlinks in Twine, if you could talk about.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. It has shitloads of footnotes, and it's kind of like a very hypertexty, it's kind of like the closest I could get to hypertext in a novella. So even when you get in the novella, you still haven't escaped from the dreadful hypertext phenomena. And is that the end of the website? Oh, there's a cool eye. It looks really cool.
Do you want to talk about some of the other twines that were involved?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I made this hypertext here, and then you could see all these little things. It's kind of this jumble that slowly unfolds. Go to the portal one. Okay, so as you read the novella, you can input keywords. And so the novella will feed into the hypertext. And so I'll read a little from the novella now. In the restaurant, a half-eaten kudzu jelly between them, listening to the voices coming from the other tables. People still discussed things as though they were real, as if they had ever been real. The sin of their certitude like temporal acoustics, catching even the slightest whispers of other certitudes from years ago, playing them back with searing, blood-clouding fidelity. She sees herself pick up the knife from the table and, smeared as it is with jelly, carry it through the city and methodically cut down everyone she comes across until she is felled by whatever system is in place to stop insane women with knives. Presumably she would learn so much about the world. Isidol puts her hand on Velas's hand, a small, private gesture in this surveilled space, blood under the skin, warm and alive. Against the statue she recognizes corroding her girlfriend. Velas starts breathing again. She doesn't remember what she was thinking about. Footnote 5. There is no such thing as thoughts. Thoughts are what we call elements, which operate with no more concern for us than fire or water. Let's see, what are some other things that interested me about this? I guess like I wanted the multimedia nature of the project wasn't just like an artistic choice. I mean, it was because we worked best having a bunch of different little things and then smooshing them together. Like individually, we'd done all this shit before, and this was our chance to like cram it together and also to work in a way that worked with disability, fatigue, chronic pain, etc. Because the thing about art is that monolithic, like huge projects are privileged over smaller ones. And it doesn't really take advantage of the interval, which is like when your body is fucked up, you are anchored to these very discrete time intervals. So a lot of my work is in the smaller format because, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that or anything really?
No, I just, no, I agree. This is something we had kind of started out with something that was a bit more monolithic, and then it just made a lot of sense to take all these things that we'd worked on. Yeah, all of these things that we'd practiced individually and put this world together that's kind of multimedia and works with the net in just all these different tendrils kind of coming off it, and like we've talked about, maybe adding more in the future.
Yeah, like there might be a song coming and it might have a print edition too, so you could like hold it in your hands and kind of like squish it, crush it. It's really important to be able to like damage art, and I'm really sorry you can't destroy what we've made that easily. Were there any questions or anything, or? Okay, that sounds good. Thanks for looking at our stuff.
So come back up.
I'm just going to invite everyone back up and we'll have a chance to discuss. I thank you all so much. That was really exciting. I'm going to pull up this chair. Oh, it's attached. Martine? Oh. So one of the things that strikes me looking at this selection of projects and thinking about, this idea of sort of nonlinear storytelling, these projects which have expansive pieces, it's interesting that like the figure of the young girl is central to all three works that we looked at. And it sort of in some ways supports the thesis of a book which many of you might know called Girlhood in the Plastic Image by Heather Warren Crow, which discusses Mouchette in great depth actually. But in this book, Heather Warren Crow argues that the figure of the young girl is sort of the most, is this sort of like very apt way to like understand internet culture because there's a plasticity to the way in which our culture has treated, that sort of category of person that that matches up with the plasticity of how we present ourselves online. And then also that figure is subjected to all of these different forces culturally and societally, some of which are violent, which I think is something that really usefully comes across. And I hate Mouchette as well. And then, really in all three works, there's actually, maybe it's most expressed in PSYCHO NYMPH EXILE, but it's certainly there in all of the work. So we heard a bit about your selection of that figure, but maybe you can all speak about the character you chose and why. Especially, maybe we can start with you on this, Mendi and Keith, because we didn't situate the work yet in relation to, it was part of a suite of works called Black Net Art Actions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So maybe you can talk about the selection of the character, but also about that series and how it fit in with the larger series first.
Yes, so the narrative in our piece came from two Hollywood films, and we didn't really name them, I don't think, when we introduced them.
Not yet.
So we were looking at kind of mid-'80s films like Pretty in Pink. I don't know if you guys know the film with Molly Ringwald. And the other film was, I guess, actually early 90s, right?
6 Degrees of Separation with Will Smith.
Yeah, so it's like Will Smith's first big, sort of small Hollywood movie with.
His first big small movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stockard Channing and Donald Sutherland. Anyway, so we were looking at these films where the lead character was sort of framed by the color pink. Right? And so then we mashed up those stories.
And so for us, the pinkness was femininity, was whiteness, was something about class, like class mobility.
Health. Yeah, and so we kind of looked back through a lot of literature and looked at how people had used pink before. And then we wanted to kind of take these films and remove the images and just deal with the idea of color as it operated in those stories.
So in sort of stripping away these things and focusing on pink and putting those together, we had our own story, but it came from other places. And then there's a little
bit of British fox hunting and Oscar Wilde, because
Why
can't go
it's
wrong.
because it was a Digital Africa exhibition, so that was exactly right.
Yeah.
What were you doing in the game? What did you have to do?
We don't really tell people what they have to do.
I tried to play it, but I was unsuccessful, I think, unless
you don't know.
Depending on what the goal was.
The
goal was to die quickly. I did that.
There are a couple of possibilities.
So we'll say there was a fox, there's a dog, and there's a hunter, and a horse.
And points.
And points.
And points.
So,
because you have to have points, otherwise
it's
a lot like real life.
That's too true. But so how about Black Nut Art Actions? This was part of that series, right?
Yeah.
What was that series?
So there are things that happened before it. It's been 13 years, so there's some things that I'm not
So you don't actually remember.
We don't really know.
No. I mean, when we got to Pink of Stealth, we had been thinking a lot about blackness. A lot of our projects had been about blackness, and we were moving into thinking about all the things that are coded in relation to blackness. So Pink was this exploration, was our next exploration.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, with Blackness for Sale, we're dealing with the idea of blackness, and then we did the interaction of colors, where we're actually looking at actual sort of skin tones, and then Pink, we wanted to deal with this color that's often sort of used, but not talked about, not taken apart in narratives.
Right. So we were thinking about we're assigning hex codes to skin colors. To kind of think through the ways sort of social engineering and color theory and the ways that people thought about color on the internet and like making sure things were consistent across browsers. The different thinking about color and proper places and proper combinations. We were interested in what that implied in all the social implications of those design theories. So the Pink of Stealth was sort of the next thing, but then we had a couple of things that happened after it to kind of go further and further into this exploration in ways that don't depend on a kind of language of race, but are still implied.
I mean, I guess we'll say one more thing about just the form of the work. The unusual thing about this project for us, it's the first sort of internet piece we made for exhibition.
Yeah.
And so that was a kind of weird thing for us at the time, and we made a lot of things
in a physical space.
Just been online, and then we sort of made this thing that was an internet piece, but it had those different elements because often when we exhibited the work, there might be one screen for each element, and often the sound piece might be multi-channel. So we've shown it a few different ways. So that's the kind of unique thing about the project for us.
Thank you. I think you mentioned Blackness for Sale, and Blackness for Sale is on view right now at the Whitechapel. So we should maybe mention that as part of Electronic Superhighway.
Yes.
And that piece is from, is it 2005?
2001.
2001? God, I'm just terrible on my dates tonight. 2004 was EAI's fault, I'm just saying.
The EAI.
I went to their website, and I was like, oh, I must have the wrong date. But I have no excuse for Blackness for Sale. But the famous gesture of selling Keith's Blackness on eBay. And I love the writing in it is so good. It's like, this is not recommended for use for voting in southern states and things like this.
In Florida.
In the United States or Florida.
Yeah. So you can see that in London.
Yes. Or online. Or the internet.
Or the internet. Whichever is more convenient for you.
However it works.
And actually, Mouchette is also showing in that exhibition. But maybe we can use this moment to transition to talking about so the selection of the character of Mouchette. How did that kind of come about? And I guess, why did it sort of stick for so long when some of your other character-based works maybe were not as long-running or that sort of thing?
Mouchette also comes from a film. There's a film by Bresson made in '67 called Mouchette, which my own character refers a lot to. Uses some elements like suicide, and there's also a work that refers precisely to the comparison of the two characters, the Bresson's character and my own. There's also the work of Bresson is also inspired by a book of Bernanos written in the 30s. So you might think the character itself incarnates itself through different medias, and who knows, it might pop up in the next one, which we have no idea of yet, in another form. So because I've been living with these characters so long, I think it has sort of taken hold of me. I'm more serving it that I have created it somehow, I could say.
And it is very much partly created by people's contributions. I mean, even the image on the front page, which is supplied by some of your fans,
Yes.
when it changes.
Yes, it's also made like this. Like, it's not so much me that it's some. In 2001, I made that part of the site which is called the identity sharing interface. So it's an identity made to be shared. So you can become Mouchette. So the interest of Mouchette is not so much that it's me or I make her, but it can be made by anyone who gets involved in the site. So contribute to the site, or even make part of it, or even become it, or even pretend to be the author. Also, that was also offered as such.
I think.
Or taken.
One of the things that, I think that something that's really present in your piece, and I think in The Pink of Stealth, there's this character is in a way like an object of some criticism. Is that kind of fair? She seems like she's maneuvering a little. And that's not that that's maybe seen so negatively. But it's definitely she. I feel like the voice is very much she. And in Mouchette, it's I. It's first person, not third person. And I think, but then it becomes very dangerous because you say that you never see Mouchette's torso, but I'm certain that I got an email where I clicked on a link and I saw her back. Didn't I?
Yeah.
Because it only appears one time and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So I can't go back and check. So it's very, it's very suggestive. And even the audio, her songs are suggestive. There's, and then not only, so there's a suggestive element, and she's fascinated with the body. And then you mentioned this. And then the other aspect of her, which is like really, politically dangerous, is that she talks a lot about suicide. And I feel like it's so interesting. Your treatment of both of these subjects of like sex and death is so lighthearted, but yet it is actually very dangerous in some way to like have this character out in the world. Has she experienced a lot of danger in her 20-year existence?
Yes, the fact that she uses this, the subject of adolescent sexuality and how it's presented, the way I try to work with it is so much, as much things that are not being, all the things I do not say. So the unsaid being more important as what is being shown. So for example, the sound piece that I've been showing, the little voice, which can be very suggestive, are also not, you would have to interpret it. Actually, I made them because I was sick and I had a strange voice, so I was playing with it, playing with what my voice was, and then I would cut little pieces, and you might not believe it, but I was even unaware that it was suggestive. And then, of course, when I found out it really was, then it was even better. But
I was wondering if that was you. That's funny.
But it's so much. It's also the anonymity allowed that it's a lot of it is part of the readers or viewers projection. So how to leave room for that. So just hint at something, and leave the rest to what the viewer will invent or project or suppose or assume, and then so leave also that part of the interaction, the same interaction that you can have in a book or in any kind of media. So what you imagine of what is being through what is being said or shown. So more like this, like you leaving space for the reader's imagination or for the viewer's imagination.
And sometimes, as we saw in the I Hate Mouchette, that's like a very unpleasant place to visit.
Well, that's also, when I made that work, it was also a way to know who I was or who Mouchette was. Like, she's defined by the users.
Yeah.
So what they say is who she is.
So I was talking about these like danger elements, and you skipped the suicide part, but that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, you mean?
Well,
yeah, I had a low case. Yeah, I was telling you about a low case, a sort of case I had because she was examined by justice because they supposed there was suicide recipes on the site. Although I control it very much, I edit everything, I check everything, and I don't post. I didn't post a suicide recipe if there ever was, were sent to me. But yeah, so I did have that problem too with French, because at some point my site was hosted in France. So yeah, there's danger to anonymity because everybody supposes it's for bad reasons that you're doing it.
But I think the idea that the police were accusing you of encouraging suicide is in a way like a really explicit demonstration of exactly the thing you're describing, which is that you sort of like leave just enough space for the viewer's imagination, and then the viewer is a police officer, and the police officer sees a crime being committed even though there very much wasn't any crime, and what they said was happening was not at all happening. So I think it's really interesting, like you have this very precise way of setting out that relationship, but by allowing the user that much power, in a way it sort of like also gave the police the space to imagine that you were doing something very different. But I'm curious if we can just shift over to Porpentine, because we looked at Mouchette, and Mouchette is like this sprawling series of projects which grew over time. And Porpentine and Brenda, your project is also like, in a way, it's presented in this similar fashion. Something like Howling Dogs, which is a previous work by Porpentine, was a more self-enclosed twine interactive narrative. And I really, this one is more open-ended. Things could be plugged into it or taken out, in the same way that Mouchette has that open-endedness. But I wonder how you consider the role of the viewer or user, because coming from like a little bit of, we're in this moment now where hypertext, which once belonged to net art, kind of belongs to video games now, as a like that's sort of like where hypertext is being discussed today. Whereas in net art, we're talking about Instagram mostly. So, how do you consider the user? Like, are you drawing on the idea that they're like playing a game as they're navigating the world that you're, sort of suggesting here?
I mean, always. I mean, it's very intimate for me, and like was referenced earlier, I do always think of the people's fingers touching it. I had this earlier work called With Those We Love Alive, where you would draw sigils on your body when you got to key parts. It would be like, draw a sigil that represents like how you feel about this or that, or sadness or happiness, etc. And that was really cool because people sent me so many arms. They're still sending me arms, and it's been like a year later. I mean, I say arms because that's where people draw them mostly, but there's thighs and other things that people draw on. And that was really cool. So that's probably the biggest example of what you're talking about. But I mean, besides the physical limitations of my body that cause me to place things in these small little, fragments, like, it's also just the intense intimacy of being able to control every single word that unfolds. Like, it's not like a page. Even if I fragment things on a page, you can still scan up and down it omnisciently. You can just flip through it very rudely, very, at ease. And with hypertext, it puts all the control in whoever's making its hands. And it's very cinematic, very focused, like a camera. You can do so much editing. So when I do hypertext, like you could see, usually I like to have just like a sentence on screen at a time.
Yeah, I think that's, oh, go ahead.
I think that feeling of sprawl is one of the purest, in addition to working with our development style, is one of the purest pleasures that the net really has to offer. And I just really wanted to say that I'm really appreciate Mouchette. I feel like it kind of reminds me of what was so intriguing about the internet to start with. It feels like such a breath of fresh air. Now, and kind of going along with what you were saying earlier about how the web very much feels like it's turning into cable TV. Kind of, you got your Facebook channel and your Twitter and all these very like set channels that they're trying to keep you within.
And people are channels now.
Right. So yeah, I just really appreciate that sense of sprawl and that sense of like what's going to be behind this link is something that you don't feel too often these days. And yeah, I think that's really something that should be there's plenty of room to explore there.
Yeah, no, I still go back to like 90s websites and like look at them to calm myself. Like, I just love reading Neopets and GeoCities, and it's so wonderful that, just saying.
I love all these different things which are popping up, like hypertext involves the body in a different way because you have to touch the link, even if it's just with the hand of the mouse. Or the idea of possibility, what's behind the link might be unknown. And you have maybe you kill the fly. That could be, so it could be something bad. I hadn't really connected the idea of hypertext as sort of fragmented with the idea of fragmentation as an effect of trauma until this discussion, which is interesting. And it makes me think, Mendi, about keeping up appearances, another piece from Black Net Art Actions. I mean, some of your other works Pink of Stealth is a bit more lighthearted, but some of your other works are dealing more specifically with trauma. Had you thought about hypertext and fragmentation as ways of narrating trauma more effectively yourself, or is it more?
You know, I thought about the tools, and we talked a lot about, with all of our NetArt projects, we talked about kind of the tools of other works in other forms and how what was implied, you know, in the net. So with Keeping Up Appearances, which is a narrative that, like Pink of Stealth, has a whole lot of text across the screen, and then there are things that you can't see unless you move the mouse over the text. But this is a story that is essentially a story of sexual harassment, but everything that is uncomfortable is invisible until you move the mouse over it. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of conversation about what that form made possible in terms of showing. Interesting, like you can always make things invisible, but hypertext made them visible, which is kind of not how people think about or talk about Keeping Up Appearances.
Yeah. I would say we spent a lot of time thinking about how people represented silences in different media, right? So how do you do silence in film? How do you do it in audio? And how do you do it in text? And so, yeah, hypertext gave us an interesting way to engage with silence.
Yeah.
Because you could make it visible through the reveal.
There's, you know, time is weirdly, people don't think about hypertext as a time-based medium, but it kind of is, you know, in that it's many things at the same time, but movement makes different things visible. So it's different from film, it's different from audio, but like those things, it is a time-based, your experience of it is time-based.
I wonder if there are any questions from all of you. You've been very nicely listening to us up here. I can, yeah. Does anyone want to jump in?
I'll jump in. Hi. I guess this is mostly a question for the middle and my left of the panel, so the middle and your right. Sorry, Mouchette. But I hear a lot of discussion about the relationship of your projects to cinema, or the relationship of your projects to audio art. And I'm a writer, and I'm really interested in the relationship of your projects to more traditional concepts of like literary art, such as, I know Porpentine, you mentioned the novella, or you conceptualize your project as a novella. And I was just wondering how you guys contextualize your work in light of like that kind of medium. Because like a lot of, did this go off? No, okay, you can still hear me talking, great. I'm gonna just keep talking while I have a captive audience. I mean, like a lot of literary magazines, for example, are shifting to an online format, and it seems like there are some really cool opportunities for promoting different kinds of ways of interacting with text, and I personally am really excited by that, and it seems like you guys obviously are too. So I was just wondering about if you could speak to that. I know it's not like a super cogent question, but I feel like you might have some wisdom for me. Thanks.
So relationship, you know, coming from a more literary perspective, do you ever think of your work as literature? And Mendi and Keith, why don't you?
I would say that all of our work is literary. But the question is do we think about, was the question how do we think of our work in relation to the literary, or something about publishing, or both of those things?
That's okay. I guess both questions for me are really important, because I think, I mean, they're different, right? Like, like the literary whatever is different, isn't necessarily what's going to be published. But yeah, I think it's like, how do you guys conceive of your work in regards to the concept of what is or isn't literary, and then maybe I think think maybe that's more interesting to me.
I think
if you wouldn't mind.
I would say that I come from writing, and so I've always thought about, what we do in the kind of history of literature. So there's that. One thing that we have sometimes found, though, is that if you're working as tech sound or as net art or just in other venues, audiences don't always make the connections that the artists are making. So, the question is, if you want to, do lots of work in a world where the audience has another kind of perspective on it, then there's a kind of dual thing. There's a thing that I'm doing. There's a thing that the audience sees, and so that's an interesting film on the experience. And I don't know how much I think about literary publishing as a venue, for the work that we do.
I mean, we put some things out in a kind of traditional literary format. But I would say that, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about those avenues. I mean, we mainly think about stories and how they're put together.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really like to think about the terms too much. It's just like annoying when you have to like actually present it or market it to someone or write press or whatever, and then you're like, oh, it's like a hyper poem or it's like this or that, and you can have some fun making stuff up. Like, it's definitely been a challenge throughout my career because my shit's always like straddled all these different worlds. Like, the literary world doesn't quite know what to do with it. The game world doesn't know quite what to do with it. But, there's been cool folks. And then, of course, there's art world and all these different nebulously defined worlds. And there's been cool folks in each of them who has, like, reached out and helped them find weird little nomadic homes. But, I mean, definitely I like to think of mediums I'm working in through the lens of another medium, and kind of just flip back and forth and get new perspectives on them.
I want to just also give a shout out to the fact that, like, in the 80s and up to through the mid 90s, the literary world was very excited about hypertext. Kind of, it's amazing how, like, they fell out of favor with it, like right at the moment that the web made it popular.
Yeah.
I sort of love that. Gotta love the literary world. But in fact, like, Tim Berners-Lee went to hypertext conferences in the US before his proposal for the web, in which people like Michael Joyce and David Bolter, I think, founders of StorySpace, presented their CD-ROM hypertext authoring software. So he was like conversant with ideas coming from, an official literary world that, had like maybe more of a relationship with hypertext than it does today. So it's interesting how these ideas sort of change over time. There was one, I think we have time for one more question, and then I had already sort of promised it. I'm sorry. No, I mean, to you I promised it. I'm apologizing to him behind you.
I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm really nervous because Porpentine's over there, so I'm sorry. But this is kind of for everyone on the panel, and mostly Porpentine, because there's a special place in my heart for your work, so please tell me if I'm mispronouncing your name.
No, it's good. Just say it
Porpentine.
however it makes you happy.
All right, thank you. Okay, so for each of your work, is there a question that you feel like we should be asking as we experience it, like that's essential to it? Like, if the project answers it or not, it's not really important, but what questions do you feel like really should be, asked of your projects? I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Like, what do we wish people would talk about in regards to them, or?
Yeah, like what? Yeah, like that.
I guess like sometimes I'll like have this kind of like, oh, this is really cool. People should like totally focus on this part of the project, and then people will focus on a totally different part. Often something I never like really got, like, I don't know, usually people deliver the subtext of my own art to me because I'll make it like pretty like fast or like stream of consciousnessedly, and then, you know, kind of collapse, and then like a few weeks later people will be like, oh yeah, wow, I really like that theme, and I'll be like, wow, that was a really good theme, and that was a really good subtext. I don't remember putting it there, but yeah.
We can do one more. Okay, sorry.
So I think this is a question for everybody. We heard a little bit from Mendi and Keith specifically about how they've used, so they were talking about using the hex codes for colors as kind of both like a world building system and kind of a system of representing information in a particular way. So given that there's like a strong thread between these three different works and these three sets of artists, I'm kind of wondering, hearing from all of you, sort of how you see sort of the work that you've created as a way to interpret or understand the world. Like, is it like, how do you see your work in terms of structuring information? How does it help you make sense of what you're writing about, and sort of how you approach this topic, the different sort of focuses for your works?
So I'm thinking something that I think answers your question, but might also answer the question before or one or the other. But I think there's one of the big questions that became clear as we did the Black Network Actions, and is still sort of at the core of our work today, is what does it mean to code living beings? You know, what does code do to our experience of living beings? So the work is not so much, I would say, that question is not always focused outward. You know, sometimes it's for us to understand. I mean, obviously we're communicating things to you all. Sometimes we're telling you a story, but our getting there and shaping the story and editing it and giving it its character is about understanding that for ourselves.
I would agree with that.
Good. I'm glad you agree. We can continue the work.
I definitely have thought a lot about that. I would say my art is very, very deliberately a beacon, like something I do put out into the world for, like, I guess a few reasons. Like, I spent a lot of my life like kind of drifting around, you know, being homeless and not having a lot of other things. And it was a very isolated kind of set of decades. So, and then that would be, I guess, a reason why it's important for me to very, very crisply, with clarity, insert what I care about into my art to make it very personal, because it's really this tool for kind of inspecting the world and knowing more about it for me, like this incredibly complex avant-garde echolocation. And then I guess with like disability and chronic fatigue, art can kind of talk for me when I can't. Like, it's like this also very complicated avant-garde lever. Like it's a machine, it reproduces labor. Like, instead of saying something many, many times and constantly trying to be heard, I can create this little automaton, this little homunculus version of what's going on, and just send it out into the world. And then, like, I don't know, people can kind of just look at my catalog of art that I've made and know, I don't know, what I care about, what I need, like what matters to me. And we can have a conversation before we've even met. So, yeah.
Yeah. Personally, I feel I'm sort of very lucky to have been in a situation where I could experiment in, where I had that, where I could be a pioneer or a first to experiment in a situation that didn't have models. So to be, to create a form without having any specific figure or model which I would refer to. So the chance to experiment in medium of like how you mix text and image, how you mix text, image, and sound, how you add movement to it. Program with which you could do a little bit of sound or a little bit of everything. So I felt I was very lucky to get started to be able to start with a medium, because a lot of things were available and a lot of without having big models to confront yourself to, or I still look back not in nostalgia, but as a model to a time where things were all possible, that you could do it all by yourself, let's say, and to have that everybody who has seen it can do it as well. So that freedom of making your own mix of all these things was a freedom you took, but a freedom you gave at the same time. So this is what I could say of what I think of the net and how I try to keep thinking of the net until now, even if that doesn't seem so relevant for what we are experiencing now, but a little bit of that freedom that you can take and that you can give is still out there to us.
HyperText on the Net was always addressing a community of writers as well as a community of readers. And that was a big difference between HyperText online and on the CD-ROM. And that was a good question, Tanwa. Thank you. Thank you so much to my panelists, and thank you to all of you for attending this NetArt recital. Let's have a big round of applause for